All right, welcome. Today, we're going to dive deep into the world of development economics and unpack a really powerful theory from a guy named Harvey Leibenstein. And honestly, it's a theory that tries to answer a massive, really tough question.
So what's that question? It's this. Why are some countries just stuck in poverty? Why can't they seem to break free from that cycle that just keeps them underdeveloped? Well, Leibenstein came up with a pretty compelling explanation.
Okay, so his whole theory kicks off with this idea he called the vicious circle of poverty. And it's exactly what it sounds like, a self-reinforcing trap that is incredibly hard to get out of. So let's break down how this trap really works. So Leibenstein's big argument was that poor countries are basically caught in what he called a low-income equilibrium. Now, what does that mean? It's a state where the income per person is just so low that trying to generate the savings and investment you need for real, sustained growth, well, it feels pretty much impossible.
Think about it like this. In any economy, you've got these two opposing forces constantly at play. On one side, you have shocks, and these are all the things that tend to pull per capita income down. But on the other side, you've got stimulants. And yeah, you guessed it, those are the forces pushing income up.
So here's the real kicker, the core of the problem according to Leibenstein. In underdeveloped economies, those shocks, the forces pulling everything down, are just consistently stronger than the stimulants. And that's exactly why any small little attempts to grow just fail. They get completely wiped out. All right, so if small steps are doomed to fail, what's the answer? How do you get out of this trap? Well, Leibenstein's answer is his most famous idea, the critical minimum effort. Basically, it's the huge, large-scale push that a country needs to finally break the cycle. Now, to really get what he means by this effort, we need to look at two different types of economic activities he talked about. First, you have zero-sum activities. Think of things like creating a monopoly or just speculating on land. These don't actually make the country any richer, they just shuffle the existing money around. But then you have positive-sum activities, things like real innovation or new investments. These are the things that genuinely grow the whole economic pie for everyone. And right there, that's the key. He argued that this minimum effort has to be massive. It's got to be big enough to completely change the entire economic environment. The goal is to create a system that actually rewards those positive-sum activities, to get people focused on real growth instead of just fighting over a bigger piece of a tiny pie.
Okay, this might sound a bit abstract, so let's look at a graph to really see how this theory plays out. I think seeing it visually is going to make the whole idea of the trap, and more importantly, the escape from it, a lot clearer.
Okay, so take a look at this graph. See that point E? That right there is the low-level equilibrium trap we've been talking about. At this exact spot, the forces pushing income up, that's the XT curve, and the forces dragging it down, the ZT curve, they're in a perfect but terrible balance. The economy is just stuck. It's not going anywhere.
Okay, so now watch what happens if we try just a small little push, a small stimulant. Let's say we manage to nudge the per capita income up a bit, from O to Ohm. Look what happens. At this new level, the depressing forces, that line FB, are actually stronger now than the raising forces, NA. So what's the result? The economy gets dragged down that ABCD path and, boom, it falls right back to where it started, at point E. That small push? It did absolutely nothing.
But what if we go big? What if we apply that critical minimum effort and give the economy a huge push, all the way up to OK? Well, now the story completely flips. At this new, higher level, the income-raising forces, SG, are finally stronger than the depressing forces. And from here, the economy can power past point G and get on a path of self-sustained growth. That, right there, is the escape hatch from the poverty trap.
But wait, the story doesn't end there. It's not quite that simple. Leibenstein pointed out another massive hurdle, a huge shock that can pull a country right back down into the trap. And that hurdle is population growth. See, what he noticed was that when incomes in a poor country start to go up, you get better sanitation, better healthcare, that kind of thing. And that makes the death rate fall, and it falls pretty quickly. The problem is, social norms around how many kids people have, well, those change a lot more slowly. So the birth rate doesn't really drop to match.
And this graph right here shows that exact problem perfectly. So as the per capita income, that's on the y-axis, starts to rise, say from the bottom O up to OYC, take a look at what happens to the growth rates on the x-axis. The population growth rate, which is that P curve, actually starts growing faster than the national income growth rate, the N curve. That's a huge problem.
This little period right here is what economists call the population hump. And think about it, if your population is growing faster than your money is, your income per person is actually going down. It's a massive shock to the system that threatens to push the whole economy right back into the trap it was trying so hard to escape.
So, according to Leibensten, the name of the game is to get your income growing fast enough to overcome this population barrier. He figured that barrier maxes out at around 3 to 4% population growth per year. So your economic growth has to beat that number if you want to finally get ahead of the curve.
Look, this is a really powerful and influential theory. It's shaped economic planning for decades. But like any big idea, it's not perfect, right? It's got some flaws. So let's be fair and take a look at some of the main criticisms.
Okay, for starters, critics point out that the link between income and population isn't nearly as straightforward as the theory suggests. I mean, in a lot of developing countries, death rates drop like a rock because of things like imported medicine and vaccination campaigns, not just because incomes went up. And on the flip side, the decision to have fewer kids is super complex. It's tied to education, city life, cultural shifts, not just how much money you have. Plus, the theory kind of ignores the huge role governments can play with things like family planning programs.
And there are other good points, too. We've seen from real-world experience that just because you break some growth barrier, it doesn't mean you're guaranteed a permanent takeoff. Economies can and definitely do fall back. On top of that, a lot of economists today would say the model's ideas about how income just automatically turns into savings and investment are, well, a bit too simple. And a final big one, the theory is mostly built for a closed economy, which means it doesn't really factor in the huge impact of foreign aid, outside investment, and global trade.
So, when you boil it all down, Leibensten theory is really arguing for one thing. To escape poverty, a country needs a single, massive, all-out investment, that big push, to finally break free. But this leaves us with a really crucial question, doesn't it? Is that really the only way? Or could a slower, steadier approach, one built on smaller, consistent, and well-aimed efforts, actually be the real path to development? Honestly, that's a debate that is still shaping our world today.